sound is missing because there's airplane.
Right in the microphone.
So anyway, it's my great pleasure for this meeting conference today. I would like to thank Mr. Shapiro and the World Affairs Council of Atlanta for organizing such a wonderful event today. I also like to extend my gratitude to Professor Han-Sik-Ah and Mr. Scott Snyder and Professor Kim Ryan for joining us today. The peace process on the Korean Peninsula started on the occasions of Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games early last year. Through 3 inter-Korean summits, South and North Korea agreed on many steps toward diffusing tensions on the Korean Peninsula. Also, President Trump and Chairman Kim Jong-un of North Korea met 3 times. As President Moon mentioned, the Panmunjom summit last June was like a vast declaration between United States and North Korea to end hostile relations and open a new era of peace. Continuing talks with North Korea, such as the Panmunjom summit and the recent working level discussions between U.S. and North Korea, are very important in maintaining the moments. I look forward to seeing significant progress in the negotiations between United States and North Korea. Last September, President Moon Jae-in of Republic of Korea addressed the United Nations General Assembly and mentioned the 3 unchanged principles in resolving issues related to the peninsula, which are zero tolerance for war, mutual security guarantee, and co-prosperity. Based on these 3 principles, I truly hope we can elicit productive result in resolving nuclear issues and establishing permanent peace on the Korean Peninsula. At the same time, I need to bear in mind that North Korea's nuclear issue has been one of the most difficult diplomatic agendas that previous U.S. administrations could not solve. It will take time to reach our final destination of complete denuclearization of North Korea. As we have seen with the working level talks on October 5th between the United States and North Korea, there may be many ups and downs in the negotiations process. However, it is very important that we encourage North Korea on the path to permanent and solid peace. I would like to ask your continued support and interest on these issues. Lastly, I hope this conference will be a valuable opportunity to share various opinions on the prospect of peace and peaceful Korean Peninsula. Thank you.
Kim Ryman as the moderator, but Sujin Park, unfortunately, her plane was canceled last night because Atlanta airport was closed, and then the weather got bad in Washington, and she couldn't get here early enough this morning to be here. So our panelists, and you've got their full bios in the program that you see. Dr. Han-Sik-Ah, who's Professor Emeritus, founding director of the Center for the Study of Global Issues at the University of Georgia. Dr. Scott Snyder, who's a senior fellow for Korea Studies and director of the program on U.S.-Korea policy at the Council on Foreign Relations. And our moderator, Dr. Kim Ryman, who's an associate professor of political science at Georgia State University, the one that's right next door. So, yeah, no problem.
My name is Kim Ryman. Welcome to an exciting panel today. I'm terribly sorry that Sujin Park couldn't make it and share her reflections because she's done her former work for the Unification Ministry and is really looking forward. But we still have 2 amazing experts and scholars who also have some great insights that they can share with us on peace on the Korean Peninsula. So let me introduce them to you first, and then we'll start a conversation. So So Dr. Han Park, many of you in the room already know him. He's emeritus professor emeritus and longtime professor of international affairs and the founding director of the Center for the Study of Global Issues at the University of Georgia in the School of Public and International Affairs. But Dr. Park's also a longtime activist and peace activist. He's done a lot to try to promote peace, not only in the Korean Peninsula, but all over the world, and has been awarded for it, and is the author also of numerous books on the Korean Peninsula and on North Korea, including North Korea Demystified, North Korea, the Politics of Unconventional Wisdom, China and North Korea Ideology, Politics, Economics. So someone who really knows a lot about North Korea. We also have, once again, Scott Snyder, who flew down from Washington, D.C. We're very grateful for him to coming down and for the Council on Foreign Relations cooperating with the World Affairs Council. Scott Snyder is a senior fellow for Korean Studies and the director of the program on U.S.-Korean policy at the Council on Foreign Relations. He's also a longtime observer of Korea, both North and South, relations between the United States and Korea, and has written many books. Thankfully, we're able to have one that you can purchase here. South Korea at the Crossroads, Autonomy and Alliance in the Era of Rival Powers. But he's also written several other books like the Japan-South Korea Identity Clash, East Asia Security in the United States, and is a co-editor of North Korea Transition, Politics, Economy, and Society, and the U.S.-South Korea Alliance Meeting New Security Challenges. So this is a great couple of speakers, and I'm looking forward to a conversation. So I thought I'd start out by talking with you, Dr. Park, and asking you, since you've been to North Korea several times and have been observing and been part of this peace process and try to promote it, what is your take on the best kind of way to go about promoting peace on the Korean Peninsula, and some of the big obstacles, and what you see as a way that we can move forward?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm so glad that I'm here in Atlanta. Atlanta is sort of my home too. I was in Athens, Georgia for 45 years, continuously talk, and I'm pretty much tired of talking. But I hope what I say might be interesting to you. Peace on Korean Peninsula, peace with North Korea. Before I think of peace, I think of the definition of peace. Normally, peace is erroneously conceived as the absence of conflict, which I do not agree. The absence of conflict is fine, but it's different from peace. Peace is, in my view, peace is harmony, the creation of oneness out of diversity. Without diversity, you cannot have harmony. So, to have North and South Korea as mutually incompatible, perhaps, at least diverse systems, cultures, policy orientations, and policies themselves, the diversity should be considered quite positive in terms of the creation of harmony between the two. So with that, harmony is acceptance of differences and working with differences for the purpose of creating oneness, which includes both, it's a more dialectical way of thinking, both thesis and antithesis. So here, we've got to accept North Korea as it is, rather than consider North Korea as the way it should be. So if North Korea is the way it is, the problem is we don't know a whole lot about North Korea. But before you have empirical data gathering, which is impossible in North Korea, we have to have a conceptual, theoretical architecture regarding analysis of a system such as North Korea. So North Korea is a unique system. I visited North Korea so many times. And first about 20 times, I thought, yeah, I saw North Korea. North Korea is a society where ordinary people live, like South Korea. They speak even the same language. But next about 10 times trip, I found out that North Korea is different from South Korea. So unique differences I was able to document. And then third 10 times, I found that North Korea is a country where Koreans do live. Koreans. So it's very important to know the Korean characteristics, the unique North Korean characteristics, North Korean common society. So with that, my answer to your question is let's accept North Korea as it is. That is the beginning of peacemaking. And if we demonize North Korea, sometimes I do too, but there's no prospect for creating any kind of harmonious coexistence as long as we maintain mutually antagonism and demonize systems.
Okay, thank you. So kind of building on that, Scott Snyder, you've been following the negotiations between the United States and North Korea for a very long time. And clearly this recognition of differences is going to be something that's going to be very difficult, but it's also something that's been at the heart of barriers to break through in that set of negotiations. What is your, can you just talk a little bit to this audience, because you've watched many different administrations deal with the negotiations. Would you just give us a little bit insight on your take on the Trump administration and its slightly different approach to North Korea and negotiations with it? How has it been successful in any way? Do you think it's been useful in any way, or it's been also caused some problems? What's your take on that?
Yeah, that's a really critical question. But before I answer that, I just wanted to say a little bit. I have a lot of respect for Dr. Park's past work and his commitment to engage with North Korea, because, it's true, information is very hard to come by about what happens inside North Korea. And even U.S. policymakers, like former Defense Secretary Kerry, used to always talk about how important it is to accept North Korea as it is. But I also have to observe that North Korea is such a unique society. It's really an outlier in the international system. And it also is a place where history is very much alive. And one aspect of that for North Korea, just as in South Korea, is the lessons from having been colonized by Japan and having lost sovereignty. And I think that North Korea has developed in such a way that it very much emphasizes its own centrality and control. Especially, it's a society that insists on political control and political loyalty. And it is a society that, because of that system, I think has, it's almost needed isolation in order to be able to perpetuate value. And so I think that the North Korean attitude from the founding was one of being in opposition to especially dominant states. And so I just want to say that because in some ways I think the core of the issue in the U.S.-North Korea relationship is related to the fact that we had a conflict, and North Korea has always felt like it is an outlier in the international system. because the Korean War was a war in which the United Nations passed a resolution and actually authorized military force to invade North Korea following North Korea's aggression into South Korea. And that effort to kind of restore peace and balance had serious consequences, and what it is, and one of them is that the U.S. and North Korea have the longest-running adversarial relationship that the United States has had with any country in the world. And it's important because on the North Korean side, I think that they always go back to how do we restore that relationship? But American memories are shorter, and so we focus on the more immediate issue of the nuclear challenge. And so U.S. policy over the last 3 decades has been very much focused on how do we denuclearize North Korea, in part because we almost forgot about the issue of peace, or we kind of put peace on the sidelines in favor of denuclearization. And so I think that one of the challenges is figuring out how to connect peace and denuclearization in order to move forward. President Trump, I think, has hit on one aspect that no other president has hit on, and that is the need to have leader-to-leader level communication. And that is very important because it has opened up new understanding and new channel of communication. If we go back to 2017, Fire and Fury, one thing that was very striking about 2017 is unlike the Cuban Missile Crisis, there was no effective channel of communication between the President of the United States and the North Korean leader. And so I would say that establishing that leader-level communication was absolutely critical. But it also has been a little bit controversial in the sense of President Trump met the decision maker, but he hasn't got the decision that we want on denuclearization. That remains to be done. And on the North Korean side, by engaging at the leader level, North Korea has achieved a certain legitimation on the international stage, but by not doing very much on the working level between governments, it's kind of avoided accountability and verification. And so that's a real challenge, because actually in order to make progress, we need to do both of those together. The accountability and verification process has been lagging. And really the risk of just having a leader-to-leader level dialogue, I think, from a North Korean perspective, is actually that here we are moving into an election year. President Trump loves to talk about his relationship with Kim Jong-un. Democrats are starting to say, well, if Trump did that, I'm not going to do it. And yet, as I mentioned before, we need the crisis communication at the leader level to be sustained regardless of political changes in the United States. And so I worry that the North Koreans, by focusing on Trump, are about to miss a critical opportunity to maintain a channel by which we try to improve the relationships between the two governments. I apologize if we're going on a little bit too long, but I just wanted to kind of frame kind of where I stood on the North Korea issue more broadly.
Great, thank you. Well, we're covering a lot of ground, which is good. So I'd like to shift the conversation a tiny bit to South Korea, the role that South Korea also plays in this, because it is part of the Korean Peninsula. And sometimes we forget about that in the United States because we're so fixated on denuclearizing North Korea and what the United States wants, And there's actually half of Korea on the bottom end is not always included in the conversation. So, Dr. Park, what do you think about the role of South Korea in promoting peace, and either the current administration or previous ones, and your experience with, kind of looking at that side of the puzzle of peace?
To me, yes, North Korea is an unknown system, and there's a lot of uncertainties about where North Korea is headed. All that, to me at this time, South Korea is no less puzzling very difficult to pin down South Korean policy, this administration's unification policy toward North Korea. I really don't know. So one thing very clear is South Korea is a sovereign state. It's not the United States, it's not North Korea. South Korea is one of the three distinctly unique parties with the characteristics and policy, goals and objectives. We need to sort out what South Korea really wants. If South Korea is going to play a role of mediating between Washington and Pyongyang, then South Korean role is one of a mediator rather than negotiator. Scott here is one of the foremost authority on mediation, different from negotiation. North Korea will not look at South Korea as a mediator. That is the problem. Mediator is usually a neutral party with the objective of putting the two adversarial parties together and promote communication, mutual understanding, and mutual acceptance. That's the role of mediator. But South Korea is not, in fact, in a position to become an effective mediator. South Korea has a clear position rather than being neutral or objective between the two. South Korea follows American lead and very in agreement with American policy orientations toward North Korea. On the issue of denuclearization, that's South Korea's primary objective as well as Washington. So it is important for me to figure out to what extent can South Korea be the mediator as opposed to the negotiator. So that's something that Scott may share his wisdom with us. Before I proceed more, other than that, if not a mediator, then negotiator, he will be a negotiator for South Korea as a sovereign state, and he may facilitate dialogue and negotiation between Washington and Pyongyang. He can play some role there, but North Korea is not going to accept that. North Korea is not going to let South Korea play that role. So North Korea wants South Korea to be outside of the loop when it comes to U.S.-North Korea relations. So here, the mediator can be a mediator, can be a negotiator for South Korea itself and for the United States. But first, I'd like to ask Scott which South Korea as a mediator.
I agree with Dr. Park 100% on this, but I'm going to elaborate just a little bit because I think that it's very important to underscore the critical intermediary role that South Korea had in terms of getting the U.S.-North Korea dialogue started. I mean, recall 2 years ago, President Trump went to the United Nations. He threatened to wipe North Korea off the face of the earth. That was quite startling rhetoric, and especially, and it was targeted at North Korea, but I think it's pretty clear that President Moon also heard that rhetoric and realized the risk. And so using the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics as a diplomatic tool, President Moon, I think, took on the very important work of reopening a pathway to peaceful denuclearization that looked like it was closed at the end of 2017. And so he revived and created the opportunity for diplomacy to occur between Kim Jong-un and President Trump. And he should take great credit for that. Unfortunately, the way things have developed, precisely because of the dynamics that Dr. Park has described, and North Korea's resistance to having South Korea play a mediating role. South Korea is now in a position where it's being marginalized. And that also, I think, is to our detriment. Because frankly, on the US side, there's a lot of wisdom in South Korea about how to deal with North Korea that we can benefit from. And so what I advocate really is that we need a parallel approach between the United States and South Korea. One very notable benefit of South Korean diplomacy toward North Korea came last year in the form of what's being called the Comprehensive Military Agreement, which actually has taken some steps toward reducing tensions between the two Koreas. And so that's really, again, focused on peace. The question is, how do you link peace and denuclearization? And the critical principle that the Moon administration announced in advance of its efforts to promote symmetry, both North Korean symmetry with South Korea and with the United States, was that the U.S.-North Korea track and the inter-Korean track should go together in parallel with each other. The way I like to think of it is that we have this inter-Korean peace track, and we have a U.S.-North Korean denuclearization track. And those tracks have to be connected by the axle, which is the U.S.-South Korea alliance. And so as long as the axle is in good shape, the car can move forward. If the axle is broken, then I think that the car is not going to move.
Yeah, it's been an interesting dynamic over different administrations and different on both the South Korean side and the United States side, difficulties to see the same way. So kind of building on this, I think something that many people are concerned about is whether or not North Korea will ever give up its nuclear weapons. A lot of people think that it won't. So I'd like to ask both of you what you think about if that's a position that's likely, and how might we bridge this gap between what the United States wants to happen in North Korea and what North Korea wants to happen in North Korea, and if there is a way to bridge that gap. So Dr. Park, if you would answer that first. And then
Right. I have been consistent for years and years to observe and to say that North Korea is not going to give up its nuclear weapons. Now, after the summit meetings on the part of all these three heads of state, I have developed a little hope for denuclearization of North Korea because of the two developments. One, I didn't realize the extent to which Kim Il-sung, the father, grandfather, the Kim Il-sung instructed the system that we need to have the peninsula denuclearization. I knew that, but I didn't know the extent to which North Koreans, especially North Korean leadership, believed that. I found out that indeed North Korean leadership and people never forget about Kim Il-sung's such instruction or such observation. North Korea is a theological theocracy, quasi-religious system where Kim Il-sung is the head of that religion. In North Korea, some of you visited there will know very well. Their ranking officials, they have their offices. Their offices in the morning when they come to work, they flip over that day calendar. So each day calendar has a full of Kim Il-sung's directives, his teachings. So everyone would have to read that and discuss about Kim Il-sung, just like we have Christian, daily kind of messages, some of these booklets. But in North Korea, is basically a quasi-religion or religious country where Kim Il-sung is at the center. So with that, then I thought people will agree to give up their weapons because Kim Il-sung wanted. But more importantly, North Korea believes they have become a nuclear power already sometime recently. They tested and they declared that we are now a nuclear state. I don't know what else should they do in order to prove that North Korea is a nuclear state. It has tested all successfully a few times. It has even ICBM, so it is a de facto nuclear state or very close to it. North Koreans deeply concerned about the demise of countries like Libya and Iraq, Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi. So Kim Jong-il, now Kim Jong-un, they both trust that their nuclear capability is the only and most reliable means which gives them security and stability. So if they believe that if we give up our weapons, then we'll be attacked and our system will be seriously challenged. And I think their worry or their concern is a legitimate one, given the international politics that we have seen last decade or two. So given this situation, North Korea is not, as long as North Korea wants to survive as a socialist system, will not give up the nuclear weapons. So Kim Il-sung wanted denuclearization, but also he wanted and worked for national security. So as long as North Korean security is believed to be threatened without nuclear armament, then probably they will never give up. In final analysis, I think North Korea is not going to give up its nuclear weapons as long as their security is perceived to be threatened. That will be the case. So now we have the possibilities, which at least the North Koreans think that these are the possible requirements or guarantees, the requirements for North Korea to be able to defend itself or have a national security without nuclear bombs. That would include peace treaty, diplomatic normalization, a non-aggression pact with the multiple governments, and so forth. But that's a separate issue. So I don't think North Korea, given today's environment, will ever think about giving up their nuclear
part. We're probably largely in agreement, but when I hear North Korean officials, and I distinctly remember hearing a North Korean official giving a speech a few years ago mentioning that it was the behest of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il that North Korea gave up its nuclear weapons. What I think they're really saying is, over my dead body, or over my founder's dead body, will I give up nuclear weapons. And now, of course, it's in the preamble to the North Korean Constitution. So we've got a serious problem. I think that it's becoming very clear that the North Korean position is essentially, well, our relationship with the United States is beset by mutual mistrust. The only possibility for denuclearization is if that mistrust is removed by the United States, relations are normalized, and then it would be possible to have a denuclearization discussion. In essence, their position is normalization of relations with the United States first, denuclearization maybe later. And that's where actually I think that the North Koreans and the Obama administration had something in common, because the Obama administration supported the global zero, and the North Koreans also have a kind of global zero policy. It's just that they want to be the last ones to give up their nuclear weapons, whereas we would like to say, okay, let's all agree to give up 50, and that means North Korea would be denuclearized, and the U.S. and Russia would still have nuclear weapons. And then just one final note. So what do the North Koreans think that they can get out of this dialogue? And I had a very interesting conversation with a senior North Korean official in a private meeting in January of 2016 that I often go back and reflect on when I have to think about this question. And essentially, this is a person who had been working on the relationship with the United States for the vast majority of his career. He had expected, I had first met him in the early 1990s, I think that he expected that the U.S. and North Korea would find a way to normalize relations. The way that he described the pathway that they were looking at in 2016 was to invoke the U.S.-Soviet confrontation and to talk about détente. So what he meant is détente in the sense of the U.S. and North Korea establish an accommodative relationship while North Korea continues to stay as a nuclear state. And I think that that ends up being what, their desired pathway is. The U.S. pathway continues to be a denuclearization pathway, and that means that our respective circles of interest are not intersecting. And they have not been intersecting for at least 5 years. The nuclear program has become a fundamental stumbling block to improving the U.S. North Korea relationship.
If I may.
Okay, one last comment, because I think it's time for us to open up the floor to get some questions, because we don't have that much time left. Is that okay? And hopefully, so I'd like to open up the floor now to questions. Do we have a mic going around? So if you have a question.
Pretty simple one. What about China? Where's China at on this?
Okay, either if you want to answer that question, or anything.
Yeah, I think it's important for us to recognize and accept the fact that North Korea and China are beyond our speculation, very close. And there is security alliance, but culturally, psychologically, the two systems are very close. We have to realize that. Still, China is just like South and North Korea. It's Kim Il-sung's country in its embodied sense, political cultural sense. China is Mao's China, still. Remember, Mao, during the Korean War, lost his son in the Korean conflict. And his grave, his body is still in North Korea, and very well regarded kind of, and given their Confucian civilization, that kind of relationship is very important. So North Korea and China are very close, their security alliance and everything else. In terms of unification policy, North Korea may be looking at Chinese unification policy very carefully. If China's unification policy, I'm not quite sure, but Chinese unification policy is wait, wait, and wait. Whereas North Korea cannot wait as much, it seems to me. So the two countries are very close. That's I want to point out.
I'm just going to add a little bit on that. China is really an interesting player in all of this right now. And actually, the United States and China do have a shared interest in North Korea's denuclearization. but China also has some other interests related to North Korea that apparently supersede its interest in denuclearization. And so what I find interesting is that historically, China is spurred to action if it looks like the U.S. and North Korea are going to engage in confrontation. And China also is concerned about North Korea strategically being close to the United States. And so I think that what we witnessed over the course of 2018 and 2019 was actually a remarkable turnaround by China. Xi Jinping had met with the South Korean leader on a number of occasions since he came to power in 2013, but he had never met with the North Korean leader until Trump announced that he was going to meet with Kim Jong-un. And then sure enough, as was the case in past North Korean diplomatic efforts, the first major summit meeting that Kim Jong-un had was with Xi Jinping, right before he met with the South Korean president and before he met with President Trump. And so essentially for the Chinese, they're concerned about the longer term orientation of the Korean Peninsula. And the prospect of a U.S.-North Korea rapprochement stimulated a more active policy by China to try to secure its geopolitical interests in being involved in any kind of solution on the peninsula. Now, what about the North Korean perspective on that? This is really interesting because from the beginning of this year we had a major issue, a major set of developments in the North Korea-China relationship. First, Kim Jong-un visited Beijing again in January, and then Xi Jinping was the first Chinese leader in, I think, 14 years to visit Pyongyang. Immediately after the January meeting in Beijing, there's some very interesting North Korean commentary about, well, what's the relationship between the China-North Korea relationship and the North Korea-U.S. relationship? And essentially they spelled out a scenario where North Korea would have geostrategic weight and would actually be the center of a kind of competitive relationship between the U.S. and China. And I think that a nuclear North Korea would seek to expand divisions between the United States and China. Another way of putting this is that, in my view, North Korea lives in the geostrategic space created by Sino-U.S. mistrust. That's what gives them the latitude to be able to maneuver in their own geostrategic context.
Could you put an economic lens on prospects for the peninsula? With or without sanctions, what are the prospects for an economic collapse or a really chaotic economic situation in North Korea? And would that make them more or less dangerous?
That's an interesting question. I'll try to go first this time, I guess. So the U.S. policy is premised on the idea that we're imposing maximum pressure on North Korea in order to drive a choice between economic development and denuclearization, because the North Koreans want to have their cake and eat it too. But what's really remarkable, despite our maximum pressure and all of the UN sanctions, is that North Korea enjoys price stability internally. Sanctions are not having the desired effect because the China-North Korea relationship has improved. And the Chinese are obeying the UN Security Council resolutions, but they've way ramped up Chinese tourism into North Korea over the course of the past year. And I think that's generating foreign currency support for North Korea. So actually, I think the likelihood of an economic collapse is low. And it probably would be higher, actually, if North Korea followed a true market economy pathway that would only be available if they denuclearized. So in some ways, you could make an argument that for North Korea, holding on to nuclear weapons is actually a buffer against the risks of overly rapid economic growth. But North Korea obviously is still in need, and that's the reason why they've been making overtures to South Korea. They want the North Korean economic projects restarted. they want the U.S. to lift sanctions early on as part of any kind of process. And so that's, Hanoi basically what they wanted is they offered partial denuclearization in exchange for sanctions relief. We wanted complete denuclearization in tandem with sanctions relief, and that was really the core provision.
North Korean economic difficulty, yes, it's there. Has been there for a long time, especially in 1990s. The extent of their food shortage was such that perhaps millions, maybe a couple of millions people died of starvation. It's not there that way anymore in North Korea. The economy, no one knows for sure, but it's not a lot of people starving. I think there's a very informal, unofficial, under the table kind of trade relations at the private level between North Korea and some other countries, notably China, important. I was born in China, Northeast China. They raise rice. They grow rice, only Koreans welcome. They grow, it's a water rice, it's a very sticky Korean rice. But when they produced, even before Mao's time, communist time, when they produced, in fact, a lot of it went to Korea, North Korea and South Korea. I assume that that's the case. I visited my hometown birthplace many times, but they grow the same rice, but they're gone. Chinese do not consume, and they cannot, or they will not sell there for international trade. Where did rice go? And I think it's only North Korea that will mass consume Northeast Chinese rice. So what I'm getting at is North Korea somehow has learned how to live without economic prosperity. So I'm very sorry. So the point I'm making is North Korea will not economically collapse. Even if it does, the system, political system, will not collapse, because the North Korean system's legitimacy is based on ideology rather than economic performance. So, North Korea may collapse economically, that doesn't mean the system politically will collapse. So we have to realize that. One quick thing, we have to know that in terms of developmental status, where is North Korea? His father was, in fact, accomplished what is called the security interest by developing nuclear weapons and so forth. That's his father. It's not the product of nuclear. North Korea becoming a de facto nuclear state was made by Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, rather than Kim Jong-un. His grandfather, Kim Il-sung, developed an ideology with which they legitimized their sovereign state, their self-reliance doctrine. And now security and ideological underpinning of the system taken care of. So this guy, young fellow's job, the main job is prosperity or economic development. For that, they have to participate in the international market and very selectively capitalize private property. That's what they will do. They cannot do without collaborating with South Korea and the United States and perhaps even other communist or socialist systems. So here Kim Jong-un's primary objective is to expand the economy. But that doesn't mean it will expand the economy at the expense of national security or regime legitimacy. But it will expand compromise economic laws and policies. It's a good opportunity for North Koreans are quite open to work with Koreans overseas. That's a quite interesting proposition. If the overseas Koreans are interested in developing long-term economic relationships with North Korea now and after unification, perhaps, then they are looking at overseas Korean communities very carefully.
Yeah, I think we have time for one more question. Yes. Or is there, oh, actually, we'll state your questions and then we'll see what we can answer up here. So 2 questions, one here and one over there.
So thank you very much. I'd like to ask some questions to Scott Snyder. So I personally believe that the North Korea may be completely denuclearized if their security is guaranteed by the U.S. But then thinking about many the difficult hurdles from the U.S. side, say the people, the North Korea and the people in North Korea, they've been demonized for a long time. So I'm expecting a lot of resistance from the just typical people here in the U.S. Also, in terms of government-wise, it's critically important interest in the U.S. troops staying in Korean Peninsula in terms of the Pacific, all the securities and all that. So if eventually the North Korea is completely denuclearized and there may be some request that U.S. action troops has to also leave. So that's also concerns, I guess, from the government side in terms of the U.S. security. Also, lastly, a lot of Congress and a lot of senators, they are being supported by the industry actually making a lot of weapons, and then they are selling all those weapons to South Korea, multi-billion dollars. And I guess South Korea is #1 country who are purchasing all those weapons from the U.S. worldwide. So at those 3 different very difficult hurdles, do you really eventually think that no matter what the denuclearization definition is, if the North Korea is actually willing to do that, then the U.S. is actually ready to give them, say, peace treaty or any safety?
Okay, it has to be a short question because we're out of time right now. So just make it extremely short because, actually, I'm sorry. Why don't we just answer this question because I think we only have a couple of minutes left right now. Is it short? We literally have like 5 minutes left or less. Yeah, 30 seconds.
Disclaimer first though, because this might sound sensitive to some people, but I'm very critical of North Korea's nuclear ambitions. And but what came off to me as odd while I was watching one of the State of the Union speech by President Trump was that while President Trump was talking about the denuclearization of North Korea, at the same time he was mentioning the modernization of the U.S. nuclear weapons. So is U.S., do you think, it might follow up with Professor Chang's question earlier, but do you think U.S. is justified in just solely demanding North Korea's nuclear weapons? And if there would be progress, if U.S. would actually offer some concession to denuclearization of the U.S.?
Okay, so I actually, what I see from the Singapore Declaration was new U.S.-North Korea relations, peace on the Korean Peninsula, and working toward complete denuclearization, along with POW/MIAs. And so essentially it means that the United States is willing to put on the table a peace and denuclearization process. But I think that it has to be linked. And one reason why I think that that is a long-standing U.S. position is because if you go back and look at the 6-party joint statement, from 2005, a previous iteration of our effort to try to denuclearize North Korea, economic development, normalization of relations, and peace were also, on the table in the mix. So I actually think that the U.S. government is willing to sequence those processes, but they have to go together. And I think the main reason for that is that you can't have a sustainable peace on the Korean Peninsula without North Korea also relinquishing the nuclear threat. Because ultimately it's about the regional balance between North and South Korea. And with regards to the future of the U.S. Troop presence on the Korean Peninsula, I actually believe that if denuclearization and peace were achieved, there would be greater pressure from the U.S. public than the South Korean public or the Korean public for force removal or withdrawal. And so, I do believe that if we can achieve that peace on the peninsula, that it would necessitate and would gain support for a drastically changed U.S. security presence. I think the relationship would probably be sustained, could be sustained as an alliance relationship, but I don't think that there would be a need for the presence in the same form that it is now. So I actually believe that there is space for the U.S. government to embrace a different point of view, and I don't see troop presence as an insuperable obstacle to moving down that path.
Very,
We have 2 minutes, you get the last word.
very quickly. When money talks, people listen. So that moneytocracy is replacing democracy. Where is the money? In the market of the market element, the military industrial, the market of weapons is very significant. When North Korea tested these missiles, I know, I heard, I saw. International potential buyers are coming to Pyongyang or wherever to see the demonstration of their weapons. More importantly, in South Korea, U.S.-South Korean joint military exercise, market, international market moves. So important. Young professor there mentioned that the situation in Korea right now, North Korea being a demonized, threatening entity, threatening the U.S. and everyone else in the world, that is quite useful for South Korea to justify its weapons purchase, North Korea, the United States to justify sending weapons to perhaps pretty soon to Japan, as well as Taiwan and so on. So we're now looking at money saturated and weapons saturated region in that part of the world, without North Korea being perceived to be a devil and with military capability to hurt everyone. South Korea will not be able to justify importing of weapons. America will not be able to justify sending weapons left and right. So, China is an important potential adversary to the United States, and therefore to check China against Chinese expansion, militarization, South Korea needs to continue to be strong American ally, and for that, U.S.-North Korea relations might be where it is, not really improving. And that is a really pessimistic but realistic way of looking at the situation where money talks as opposed to people talk.
Okay, with that, we're going to close. Charles, did you want to make any last comments?
I wanted to say thank you to you, tonight. This was great. Sitting next to Dennis, who said it, really extraordinary insights into South Korea, North Korea, and into ourselves, the United States, that I really appreciate. This has been maybe the meatiest 90-minute discussion I can remember having. So I want to thank you all. We've got, okay. We've got some gifts. You know, you flew all this way from Washington. You drove down from Athens or from wherever. You're living in Atlanta or Athens? You live in Atlanta now.
Augusta.
Augusta, better yet. Okay. So, Scott, this is for you.
Thank you so much.
For you, I want to thank you very much. And this is for the Consul General. Thank you. This has been great. Don't think quite yet. We've got some upcoming programs that I want to make sure you all know about. On November 18th, right here, we've got an evening program, reception, and discussion with Ambassador Thomas Pickering. Okay, Tom Pickering is one of the superstars, the rock star of diplomacy. He's been ambassador to, U.S. ambassador, to the United Nations, to Russia, to India, Israel, Nigeria, El Salvador, and Jordan. That's 6 really important embassies. He's a star. He's going to talk about Middle East beyond oil. So, and as the pieces are settling out, the Middle East is reshuffling. This is going to be an extraordinary conversation, so please come. Our November 18th. And then on November 21, our young leaders together, our under 35 members, together with the Alliance Française, have got a program at the Alliance Française on, this is the 400th year of slavery in what is now the United States, and this is the year of return. And so we've got some great speakers. It's going to be terrific. You don't have to be, if you're over 35, if you're twice 35, as I am, you can still come to this program. So I invite you all to come. It's going to be terrific. If you'd like more on Korea, the Deputy Foreign Minister of Korea is going to be here on the 19th at lunch. That another organization is organizing, so you can get more about that. Please join the World Affairs Council if you're not a member. Alice Dasha is right here. She's the perfect young woman you need to talk to if you want to sign up. It's terrific. Those of you who belong, you know how great it is. And I invite all you CFR members here. You can't get enough of the CFR to join the World Affairs Council. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you again for fabulous.